With the 2024 MLB regular season now in the books, let's take a deep dive into the Cubs pitching staff and break down their performances this year. We'll highlight the standouts, surprises, and best pitching performances we saw. It was a disappointing season again for the Cubs as they finished 83 and 79 and short of the playoffs for the second straight season with the exact same record. As we look at the season arc here, kind of a graph of winning percentages by month, we see where the Cubs dug themselves a massive hole in May and June with 35.7% winning percentage in May and then 40.7% in June. And there was just no way they would come back from that. They fought hard and tried to in the last couple months, but you can't dig yourself that big of a hole, especially with the way the Mets and Braves were playing towards the end of the season. They just weren't going to catch them. One of the things that I would like to look into more before we get into the relievers and the bullpen and all the pitchers is how Wrigley Field played this year. It played incredibly pitcher friendly. First, we'll take a look at the park factors for Parks this season. This is the least amount of runs expected or that happened at those parks this year. And you'll see Wrigley played 29th out of 30 major league teams, so second to last. Only T-Mobile Park in Seattle played to less runs this year, which is pretty crazy when you think Wrigley Field. A lot of people think it's offensive park. This year was quite the opposite, so very pitcher friendly this year. I mean, you'll notice Journey Bank Ballpark on here. That's the one where the one game was played for the Little League Williamsport Series. This graph does a pretty good job of looking back over the past 4 years to see the fluctuations of Wrigley Field and how crazy of a year 2024 was, ranking 29th in the MLB in runs. You see 2021, they were 7th, 17th in 2022, and then back to 10th in 2023. And if we overlay this one with the home runs at each ballpark, you'll see they rank pretty similarly. So, of course, runs a function of home runs. So that's something that generally fluctuates as well. So a reason maybe to look at why the Cubs totals were lower in home runs, and you can look at that from the pitching perspective as well. But guys maybe not giving up as many home runs, kind of playing into something like Shota Imanaga's great season this year, maybe something we might see correct itself if Wrigley Field plays differently in the future. Without further ado, let's get into the Cubs pitching staff. We'll start with the bullpen. And this graph, which very closely aligns with some of the spikes and dips we saw in that Cubs win percentage throughout the year. We'll see May and June. Mostly May, really, was when they struggled from the bullpen. The slugging percentage ticked way up to 418, batting average up to 251 that month. And then you'll see the batting average did generally increase the rest of the year after a big dip in June. But the bullpen was really something that I think the fans saw as a big issue, and I think a lot of that came early with the May struggles. Similar to how I create a start score for each pitcher's start, I do the same for the Cubs relievers. It takes into account the results and the expected results that happen when the pitcher is in the game. Above average outing percentage here is percent above the league average. So the higher, the better. So we want to be looking at the guys at the top as having really good seasons out of the bullpen. The way I look at it like this rather than like ERA is that it's less swayed by particularly a bad outing or something like that, which can completely kill a reliever's ERA when they only get, maybe less than 50 innings in a year or something like that. So we see a great year from Keegan Thompson. Unfortunately, he may have gotten injured in the last game of the year, so hopefully we get good news on that. But Keegan Thompson had some really good outings. Porter Hodge, probably one of the great stories of the year for the Cubs, ends the season as a reliever with a 188 ERA and a 79.5% above average outing percentage. So he's something that was very, very great for that Cubs bullpen. Another reason they kind of improved at the end of the year there was after they got Jorge Lopez off waivers from the Mets. Mark Leiter Jr. solid and they were able to flip him at the deadline, send him to the Yankees. Tyson Miller, an early season trade that he worked out really well, ended up being really that eighth inning guy ahead of Hodge at the end of the year. Ethan Roberts, we saw sparingly near the end of the season. Wisniewski had some really good multi-inning relief appearances. Luke Little, we would have liked to see more of, had some injury issues. Almonte was out early in the year injury. And then, of course, some of the reasons for those early season struggles are those guys at the bottom of the list, especially, let's say, Alzolay started the season as a reliever, really struggled, gave up homers in a lot of his outings before getting injured, and really he's going to probably miss most, if not all, of next year as well with Tommy John. Neris is a guy that struggled, especially with walks, and he was another guy. He was the guy the Cubs brought in with some big money in the offseason to shore up that bullpen, and that didn't work out. So this is just a really interesting way that I like to look at and see who's really been the most effective relievers for the Cubs this season. As we transition over to the starters, here's an example of the start score or percentile rank that I create for each game. In each start, here's an example of Shota Imanaga on August 6th against Minnesota. Great start for him with 2 earned runs, 10 Ks and 1 walk, just 4 hard hit balls, and a score of 96. So half of the percentile rank score from those expected stats, that's going to be a great score given only 4 hard hit balls. And then the other half of the percentile rank from the actual what happens, which the 2 runs might hurt a little bit. So that's kind of how I like to combine them both into the score. I'll go into these scores a little bit more as we get into the starters. All right, here we look at the Cubs starters this year by average start percentile. So the average of that start score. So we see Shota leads the way, Justin Steele in second. So both those guys, on average, the best pitchers. That doesn't really surprise anyone, I wouldn't think, for the Cubs this year. Guy a lot of people might have not forgot about, but he got hurt early on after such a strong start was Ben Brown. Ben Brown, really excited to see what he's got in the future if he can stay away from those injuries. Wisniewski didn't get a whole lot of starts, but he had 2 really good ones, which is what helps this average. Jameson Taillon, I would say, was more of a solid, consistent starter for the Cubs this year, made 28 starts. Another guy, Assad, who was, I would say, a lower ceiling guy, but he took the ball every day, was in that rotation the entire year, which is pretty good stuff considering he went into spring training as fighting for the 5th spot in that rotation. Hendricks had a real rough year, finds himself near the bottom of this list. And then Wicks and Killian didn't get many starts. Wicks had to deal with multiple injuries and really struggled, especially with the home run ball there near the end. Killian did not. He had 2, well, probably 1 start, but we'll call it 2 as he went a lot of innings in that first one. He's still struggling this time at the big leagues, but would love to see him get more comfortable in the future. Looking at average start score is one way to look at the Cubs starting pitching. Another way to tell this story is to look at the percentage that they were above league average in their starts. So above league average starts is this highlighted column, 50 plus. In there, we look and see Jameson Taillon. That's a completely different story that he's at the top now, and that speaks to his consistency. He was consistently about a little bit above league average, but he didn't have those great starts that Imanaga and Steele had that really swayed that average. So this speaks to Taillon. Brown in his few starts there, very good. Imanaga, Steele still in the middle, and then some of the same guys near the bottom. Now let's look at it by 75 plus, which is top 4th of the league. So top 25% of league starts. There it's Steele. Steele is having those really good starts that if we're going to say there's a Cy Young candidate, probably looking at Justin Steele or a guy who has the best stuff to have those highest scores in the start. We can also look at it by 90 plus, which is those really good starts. This one, you see interesting with some of the guys that didn't have as many starts, but have some of those really high ceilings with Wisniewski and Brown. Wisniewski had 2 90 plus starts. So So 2 of his 6 starts. He had a 90 and somewhere we'll look at him later, but he did have a couple of really good starts. So something that you can't just say he's someone that we're not thinking about in the future as a starter. Ben Brown up there, Imanaga and Steele. Interesting that Imanaga and Steele switched back on this one. Kind of speaking to more that Steele had a higher percentage of those 75 to 89 great starts. And let's wrap it up with a fun one. Let's look at the best starts of the year by Cubs starters. And this will be all 90 plus, so all of that 90 plus start percentiles. So top 10% of starts in the MLB made by Cubs. Here they are. We've got number 1 was Shota Imanaga's no-hitter. Well, he threw 7 innings of the no-hitter, but his no-hitter start back on September 4th against the Pirates. We've got Ben Brown, who had a great start at Milwaukee that I kind of forgot about back at the end of May 28th at Wrigley North. 7 innings, no runs, 10 Ks, no hits, and 2 walks. That start alone has got to get you excited about Ben Brown and his future. Third, we've got Justin Steele against the Tigers back on August 22nd. 7 innings, 2 earned runs, 10 Ks, no walks, 4 hits. Other ones of note, we got Hayden Wesneski. This was one of his best, or definitely his best start, but one of the best starts for the Cubs this year with 6 1/3, no earned runs, only 2 Ks, 1 walk, but only 1 hit back against the Angels on July 7th. May 4th, early on in the year, Star Wars Day, we had Jameson Taillon against the Brewers, 97th percentile start, 6 innings pitched, no earned runs, 7 Ks, 2 walks, and 2 hits. Shota, that's the one we saw that graphic of earlier against the Twins. Kyle Hendricks with his best start of the year and his only one in this top group here against the Giants back on June 19th. That was 5 2/3, 1 earned run, 8 Ks. Jameson Taillon again back against the Pirates in early September here. We got Steele against the Angels back in July. Shota May 1st at the Mets. That was one of his coming out parties with 7 innings pitched, no earned runs, 7 Ks, 1 walk, 3 hits. July 11th, we had Justin Steele in Baltimore. That one I remember as he was coming off the IL in that one. Justin Steele early on at Milwaukee, 7 innings pitched, no earned runs, 8 Ks, 1 walk, 3 hits. And then Shota with it 3 in a row there, 2 in early April, and then 1 in July against Arizona. Ben Brown with another good one against Atlanta back in May, and then Hayden Wesneski early May against Milwaukee. 6 1/3, no earned runs, 8 Ks, 2 walks, 3 hits. This is just a fun graph for me to look at to kind of remember some of the great outings and great times watching the Cubs this year. It was an interesting year, as I'll say again, with that park factor, and it really makes you wonder about Shota as he's a heavy fly ball pitcher. He had such a great year this year. I always was expecting him to give up some homers, but that Wrigley win never really blew out this year. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on as we move into next year. But really enjoyed this season. Sad to see it come to an end before we'd like to with the playoffs, but plenty to look forward to with some of these young guys with Ben Brown, Wesneski, Cade Horton. We didn't really get to see much. Super excited going forward. If you enjoyed the video, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. What was your top pitching performance of the year? Do you agree with this list? Do you think this was really the best performances of the year? Shota has to be one of the best of the year with that no-hitter, but what were some of your favorite moments? Please leave those in the comments. And until next time, and until next year for the Cubs, go Cubs.